The discovery inside Walter Greene's house did not immediately transform him into a suspect, at least not officially. Investigators understood the danger of allowing assumptions to guide an inquiry. Strange behavior alone was not evidence of a crime. People collected unusual things. Some documented daily routines. Others became deeply invested in neighborhood affairs. Odd habits were not illegal. Yet what detectives found inside Walter's home was difficult to dismiss as harmless curiosity. The notebooks filled several shelves. There were dozens of them. Each one was labeled with dates spanning years. At first glance, they resembled personal journals. But as investigators began turning pages, a different picture emerged. Walter had not been documenting his own life. He had been documenting everyone else's. Names appeared repeatedly. Addresses, vehicle descriptions, work schedules, vacation dates, arguments overheard through open windows, packages delivered to front porches, visitors arriving late at night. In some cases, entries described events so specific that investigators struggled to understand how Walter could have observed them from his property. One notebook contained nearly 20 pages dedicated to Emily Carter alone. The earliest entries began shortly after she moved into the neighborhood. Initially, the observations seemed ordinary. Leaves for work at 7:18. Returns around 6:10. Parents visit every other Sunday. But over time, the notes became increasingly detailed, increasingly personal. Walter had recorded the clothing Emily wore on certain days, the vehicles she interacted with, the times lights switched on and off inside her house, the names of friends who visited. One entry simply read, "Routine changed this week." Nothing else. No explanation. No context. Just those 4 words. Detectives found themselves returning to that sentence repeatedly. Because according to family and friends, Emily's routine had indeed changed shortly before she disappeared. The problem was that almost nobody knew about it. 3 weeks before vanishing, Emily had quietly begun meeting someone. Not a romantic partner, at least as far as investigators could determine. The meetings appeared professional in nature. She had mentioned them vaguely to a coworker, but never provided details. Phone records revealed several conversations with an unidentified number. The calls were brief, infrequent, difficult to trace. The number itself had been disconnected shortly after her disappearance. At first, investigators assumed this was simply another dead end. Then they found something disturbing. One of Walter's notebooks referenced the exact dates of those meetings. Not directly, not by description, but indirectly enough to attract attention. The entries noted unusual departures from Emily's routine on the same evenings she had met the unidentified individual. It was an observation no other resident had made, or perhaps no other resident had been watching closely enough to notice. Detectives now faced an uncomfortable question. How much had Walter actually seen? And how much had he deliberately chosen not to tell them? The answer became even less clear when investigators reviewed his original interview recordings. During the first conversation, Walter had never mentioned Emily's altered schedule. He had never referenced unfamiliar destinations. He had never discussed her meetings. Instead, he had focused almost entirely on the mysterious figure in dark clothing, a figure nobody else could verify. As investigators replayed the interviews, subtle inconsistencies began emerging. Small contradictions, shifting timelines, minor details that changed from one statement to another. Individually, they meant little. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Walter seemed unusually eager to guide attention towards certain explanations while quietly avoiding others. Whether that behavior reflected guilt, fear, or simple misunderstanding remained unclear. Then another witness came forward. Her name was Patricia Mills. She lived 2 houses away from Emily and had initially reported nothing unusual. Weeks later, however, she contacted detectives with a memory she could not stop thinking about. The night before Emily disappeared, Patricia had awakened sometime after midnight. Unable to sleep, she walked to her kitchen for water. From the window, she could see part of the street. At the time, she noticed something she considered insignificant. A light. Not outside. Inside Walter's house. Specifically, the large front room facing the neighborhood. According to Patricia, Walter appeared to be standing motionless behind the window, watching. At first, that detail seemed entirely consistent with his reputation. But then Patricia added something unexpected. Walter was holding binoculars. Detectives verified that she had never mentioned this publicly. The detail had not appeared in news reports. There was no obvious reason to fabricate it. When investigators searched Walter's property more thoroughly, they located a pair of binoculars inside a desk drawer. That alone proved nothing. Many people owned binoculars. What mattered was what they found beside them. A camera, old but functional, equipped with a powerful zoom lens. Inside were memory cards, hundreds of photographs. Most depicted ordinary neighborhood activity. Children playing, residents gardening, delivery trucks, pets, routine life. Then investigators reached a folder labeled simply, South Side. Emily lived on the south side of the street. The images inside immediately changed the tone of the investigation. Several photographs showed Emily entering and leaving her home. Others captured visitors arriving at her property. Some appeared to have been taken from significant distances. A few were photographed at night. The timestamps stretched back months. One image stood out among all the others. It had been captured 3 days before Emily vanished. The photograph showed her standing near her mailbox, speaking with an unidentified man. The man's face was partially obscured. Investigators had never seen him before. Neither family nor friends recognized him. And according to available evidence, Walter had never mentioned the encounter. Not once. Suddenly, the mysterious stranger was no longer a shadowy figure described only through Walter's memory. There was photographic evidence that someone unknown had indeed been near Emily. The question was obvious. Why had Walter concealed it? Detectives confronted him. For the first time since the investigation began, the calm, cooperative neighbor appeared unsettled. He admitted taking photographs. He admitted observing residents. He admitted keeping notes. But his explanation for withholding the image seemed surprisingly weak. He claimed he had simply forgotten about it. Investigators found that difficult to believe. The photograph was clear, important, potentially crucial. Forgetting it seemed almost impossible, especially for someone whose memory appeared detailed enough to recall the position of porch lights weeks earlier. As pressure increased, Walter's behavior began changing. Neighbors reported seeing him less frequently. Curtains remained closed. Lights stayed off. The man who once seemed eager to discuss developments now avoided conversation entirely. Then, one rainy evening, detectives received another call. This time, it came from a local storage facility. Employees were conducting a routine audit when they noticed something unusual regarding one of their units. The renter's name was Walter Greene. The unit had existed for years. Nobody knew what it contained. Investigators obtained legal authorization to examine its contents. What they found inside would force the investigation into an entirely new direction. Because among boxes filled with newspapers, photographs, and notebooks was a locked metal cabinet. And hidden inside that cabinet was an item connected to Emily Carter that should never have been there. An item Walter had never admitted possessing. An item that raised the most disturbing question yet. Had the neighbor who watched everything simply witnessed a crime? Or had he been preparing for something far darker all along? If you're enjoying this story, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next part. And let us know in the comment what you think about Walter.